Welcome to the Daily Show. May the 4th be with you. We are watching live images right now of Turn the Tide on Plastic out on leg 8 of the Volvo Ocean Race. And here in the studio back at Volvo Ocean Race headquarters in Alicante, Spain, I've got Conrad Coleman joining me as always on Friday. And Conrad, a little bit of a treat here as we get to ride along with Dee Caffari and her crew. And doing well in the race at the moment, but they are struggling for the miles in the last few position reports.
Yeah, sadly they have been bleeding a few miles there. Remember, they were recently up in the lead. They were leading the fleet, yeah, it's tough. You know, there are lots of little things that come into play in keeping these boats up to speed. You know, it can be the wind, it can be the clouds, and the way that you deal with the squalls and the sort of sail changes coming up. And so, if you're just a little bit off in any one of those areas, then you start bleeding miles. And that's where the more experienced teams have really come to the fore.
But there's an interesting thing happening here from the latest blog feed from the boat. Dee Caffari blogs in every single day. And as you can see from the images right now, there's plenty of power out there as the boat is absolutely flying along. But one theme that we've been talking a lot about is the seaweed, the sargassum seaweed across the whole race course at the moment, a real problem for these sailors. And Turn the Tide on Plastic have been explaining their method for getting rid of it, sailing down to leeward, letting the boat heel over with the stack and the keel, pulling the boat over. It lifts the leeward rudder out of the water, letting the seaweed drop off. I mean, that's quite smart.
It is indeed. A bit of a high-risk strategy, potentially, but you know, what are the alternatives? You know, basically, you can see the boat hammering away on those images now. Remember, this is live. We have a live connection with the boat. And the seaweed just gets pushed on harder and harder and harder as the boat accelerates. So you do need to do something dramatic to get it off.
And we know that Team Brunel, they've got their own method to try and get rid of it. And we're going to be taking a little bit of a look at that later on in the show. But for now, we're going to just stay with the connection with Turn the Tide on Plastic for the next few minutes. We know it's going to drop out, but look at this. I mean, the view from the bow here, Conrad, they're absolutely flying along. Masthead code 0 up, triple stacked at the front, 3 head sails. Fantastic sailing.
It is. This is awesome. So they'll have the masthead code 0, although affectionately known as the Mo, up at the end of the bowsprit there. And then you've got the J2 and then the J3. And so, you know, we've been talking for days now that the trim is absolutely crucial on all of these sails. We've certainly got plenty of sails to trim and to play with. You know, we've got 3 sails at the front plus the main that more or less regulates the heel on the boat, and the power comes from the sails at the front. And the control tab really is just the mainsail. And
we actually, the sailors have been giving us a few little insights as to how it is they get the speed out of the boat. More on that coming later. But let's see where Turn the Tide on Plastic are right now on the race course. These are the live positions. And as we're saying, this is leg 8 from Itajaí in Brazil up to Newport, Rhode Island in the United States. We're getting into those final few days. I mean, it's fairly safe to say that this has been a pretty quick leg. We're going to come in just under the estimated time. But right now, Dee Caffari is hoping that the last few days really start to show, well, that boat just gaining over the next few scheduled position reports, because Team Brunel, they are out in front. Vestas 11th Hour Racing on the right-hand side with Dongfeng Race Team on the left. But just look at the speeds at the moment. Turn the Tide on Plastic right now, much faster than the boats around them. That's got to give you a bit of confidence.
Well, yeah, and just a huge delta. You know, we've got more than 5-7 knots between the boat in first place and the boat in 4th place. And so, you know, if you were Team Brunel and you're looking right and left at Dongfeng and Vestas 11th Hour Racing keeping you company there, and then you've got one other one charging up from behind, you would certainly not be feeling 100% confident in your position out there.
Now, take a look at what's just come into view on the bottom right-hand side. Mafre and Team Axonabel. It wasn't that long ago when Team Axonabel were in front of Mafre, but the Spanish boat are really charging right now. There was a little bit of a change in order. We had Mafre furthest out to the east. Now it's Team Axonabel. Those two wriggle around. Sununkai Scallywag still some way behind. But let's take a look and see what we can pull out from the data, because all these boats being monitored here in race control, where we are right now, all the information comes in. Remember that the teams only get the 6 hourly position reports. They have to fill in the gaps with that information. But as we Turn the Tide on Plastic in the background, this is the information that we've been able to provide. And, well, Conrad, what do you immediately jump to?
Well, the first one is the distance sailed in 24 hours. That is the sort of the measurement of an offshore sailor. And it's just astonishing. We've been seeing almost everybody in the fleet going over 500 miles a day. You know, I can remember when when maxi catamarans were excited to go 500 miles in a day, and back in the 1990s. But now, you're don't want to say bad things about the Volvo 65, but your bog standard 65-foot racing boat can do that now. So it's absolutely incredible. But in the top left-hand corner, you've got Vestas 11th Hour Racing, Sunkai Scallywag, and Axo Nobel, all still above that threshold in the past 24 hours. And then in the bottom right is the VMG, or Velocity Made Good. So that's all about how best they're using the speed that they're doing through the water to point them in the direction towards Newport, Rhode Island. And so there's no point in charging around willy-nilly and going super fast in the wrong direction. What it really counts is that number down in the bottom right-hand side.
And for fans of Sunhunkai Scallywag, they will be very happy indeed, because in the last 24-hour run, the Hong Kong team have been putting in the best Velocity Made Good numbers. They are really trying to catch up. We spoke to the boat just a few moments ago before we came on air. It was Pete Cummings' birthday, a rather special birthday on board.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. I got a Star Wars edition Kinder Egg from the crew, so haven't built my toy yet, so that's got something to look forward to the next day or so. And a card from my girls, so yeah, very nice.
And you're on Sunhunkai Scallywag for the first time on this leg. I'm just wondering what the crew are thinking about now we're going into those final stages of this leg. Is there much that you can do from this position?
Yeah, we still believe it's going to be close to the finish. It's going to be a transition, close to the finish, and our routing has us only a couple of hours behind the leaders, so we're just doing everything we can. The mileage at the moment is kind of irrelevant. We just got to keep pushing hard. We're gaining on the skeds. We finally got the lift that the others have on, so we're pointing at the finish, so we're not hemorrhaging the miles. And the race is one thing, but it's kind of sharing the journey with other people and making new friends. And I've made some great friends here. They're cracking bunch of lads and girls, and really strong as a team. It's a really strong team unit. So regardless of what kind of leg it is, whether it's short, lots of manoeuvres, few manoeuvres, windy, light winds, these guys will smash through it regardless.
Pete Cumming on board Sunhunkai Scallywag, and you can follow their progress because the tracker is live. It was a little bit of a test to see whether the technology would allow it, but the intention is to keep it live all the way to the finish line in The Hague. But because it is stretching the limits of what the computer can do, occasionally the numbers do go a little bit haywire and people do get a little bit freaked out. Not least Team Brunel Shoreside. Take a look at this. This was their Instagram feed from today, and a little bit of an alarm bells ringing as Vestas 11th Hour Racing were recording 245 knots. Now, of course, this is just a little bit of a blip in the computer data being received into race control, so the computer goes a little bit haywire, not to be too alarmed. But, Conrad, it is important, now that we've got everybody following the move by move on the tracker, there are a few abnormalities that it's worth just pointing out.
Well, that's right. It could be the Bermuda Triangle. It could be the fact that all of the data from the boats has to go up to the satellites and then back down, hundreds of thousands of miles. And sometimes little bits get left behind along the route. But there are also some legitimate squiggles and some funny business going on in the tracker out there. Most notably, clouds. We've talked about this previously. I did a big demonstration on this the last weekend. You can go and check that out. But that little squiggle there where we saw Turn the Tide on Plastic, Brunel and Vestas all get hit by the same cloud is just indicative of the fact that there are lots of local little gusts and squalls coming from those clouds, and so you can follow them in real time now that the tracker is live. And
we've seen those clouds, we've seen those little wiggles on other legs, so some of you will already be up to speed on that, but what about the weed? We've been talking so much over the last 3 days about the sargassum seaweed washing over the course and slowing down everybody's progress. At the top of the show, we were just referencing that Di Cafari and the team on board Turn the Tide on Plastic have their method to keep the speed up but clear the foils. Well, the sailors on board Team Brunel sent us this quick update about how they do it.
It's quite nice now. We're going downwind and a bit of breeze, so it's not too hard to get rid of it. You just broach it out. To get it off the foils, you've got to kind of come up, put the boat into a broach. The trick is to be able to come away without having to ease the front sail. Okay, lost it. away with it there. And seagulls actually had a lot of practice broaching, you know, from the Southern Ocean. Loves a good broach. Yeah, it's true.
Carl Langford on board Team Brunel putting the boat up into a broach to clear the foils. Turn the Tide on Plastic saying they go the other way, they go down. Just talk us through the differences between the two.
Well, basically, the route or their techniques are sort of quite distinct. One is turn left, the other is turning right. So if you imagine we're on a starboard reach here, blasting away as the boats are. You've got the keel out to the side there. Now, as you bear away, like Turn the Tide on Plastic has their strategy, then all of the stack that is here and all the keel that's out to the side will rotate the boat this way. That allows the previously lured rudder to shed its load of all of the weed that was causing the problems. But you know, this is super tricky because remember, you've got the keel, you've got two dagger boards, you've got two rudders. You know, these boats are basically Swiss Army knives with bits sticking out everywhere. So you've got to keep all of that clean. And so one of them is to bear away. A little bit risky because you could potentially do a Chinese jibe if you went too far and lost control. Remember, you've got limited control when you've over these with boats when you've got clumps of weed stuck to the rudders. The alternative mode that we just saw with Brunel is to, well, wind it up the other way. Turn right, wipe the boat out, or partially, intentionally. Now that's obviously a little bit safer because you can't really do a Chinese jibe, you can do a broach, but that's potentially putting the forward sails, which are the real engine of the boat, at risk, because you have to flog them when the boat rounds up. So, you know, both options have their challenges.
Have their challenges, but it's not difficult to understand why it is that the sailors take that risk, because the next alternative is to basically stop where you are and clean it manually. Have a look at this. This was from the tracker yesterday. Dongfeng race team just slamming the brakes on, taking the boat to a complete standstill, clearing the weed from their foils before then getting underway. And that all costs time. And if you want to know what that looked like on board, the sailors sent in this video.
Since 24 hours, we are the slowest boat, and we thought in the beginning with less wind, but it's quite strange. So. And you give me some slack, I go forward, and we put it under the winch, and someone control it from the side, follow me. With the slack, it's just a safety, normally I don't use it. J'ai perdu ma pelle. Vas-y, tire-moi. Hein? Tire-moi. Encore. Okay.
Now, Niall, we talked about this the other day. The costs of stopping the boat and doing it back down and all of that. With the boats doing still more than 20 knots, 22 knots in some cases with the live speed. You know, if you slow down and stop the boat for 3 minutes, which easily they did there, then you're losing a full nautical mile to your competitors. So each one of that is hard fought. And the reason that they were willing to do that, to do such an expensive maneuver, is because, you know, Charles is absolutely obsessed about boat speed. And so he had this sort of niggling suspicion that there was something underneath the boat, something that wasn't quite right. And so he wanted, as skipper, to sort of lead from the front, go check that out for himself. And that's why on Monday, I picked him to be my skipper on the virtual fantasy watch that we put together. This is somebody who is willing to get his hands dirty, you know, get wet, sort of put himself not in danger because he was tied on, as we saw in that clip, but sort of really get out there and get involved in the thick of it. And so that's really admirable on his part, but it also speaks to the obsession, just how nuts these sailors are about chasing all the little details to make the boat go as fast as possible.
And we do see quite a bit of this with the Volvo Ocean sailors. I mean, this is something that you do see the characteristics. It's what you need. It's what you need to even begin to consider being in this race. And the crew on Turn the Tide on Plastic are no different.
Yeah, well, I'm a bit restless. Can't really sit still, and I get a bit of itchy feet when I'm up on deck. So I like to go and tweak things around the place. If we see we're not going fast, or we think we could be going a bit faster, or something doesn't look right, or you think something could be better, then you go and give it a bit of a tickle and see if it makes a difference.
Oh, I tell you, a J3 sheet sometimes, very small movement, that maybe not even half a centimetre makes quite a big difference to the leash in some cases.
Liz Wardley and Henry Bonbury on Turn the Tide on Plastic. And Conrad, you know, half a centimetre, that's what Henry Bonbury was saying that they worry about. I mean, that's a particular kind of mindset.
Well, it is. It speaks to two things. One is the mindset and just about how reactive they are, how nuts, as I said before, they are, because they have a target heel angle, and so they need to keep the boat sort of really within that to keep it fired up. And as we saw, if you don't get it perfectly right, you do slip back. So they're working hard to try and limit that. But it also speaks to where they are in the world. That we saw a couple of wiggles in the tracker from big clouds coming in, but mainly it's just small puffs, 1 knot here, 2 knots there in terms of the true wind speed. And so it means that they've got a really low threshold for getting involved. The smallest change in the wind leads to a small change in the way that you trim the boat, just to keep it fired up.
And it's very much, it's a science, it's a sort of mathematical approach to these sorts of things. And who better than the sailors coming out of the America's Cup? We've got Peter Burling, we've got Blair Tuke, and Carlo Hoosman, and they've been talking to us about just what drives them to concentrate on such small percentages.
About the small details, probably me. But once you're locked in like this, it is all about the small things. So yeah, it's got to be someone that be worried about it. So it's probably me. But then again, when it's conditions like we had a few days ago, and then thunderstorms and all that sort of thing, then trimming is totally different. But it's very big changes, So but at the moment, yeah, it's all about the small details. Yeah, well, I've been asked on a scale of 1 to 10 how detail orientated I think I am. I reckon I'd be relatively high, maybe an 8 or a 9. Quite like the detail, the fine kind of parts of it. So, keep an eye on it. It's good.
He likes to play around with all the leads of the triple head. When we go triple head, he'll go forward and play with the lead setup of the J3 and the J2, and he'll be setting it up for at least 15 minutes to 20 minutes. Yeah. Always going for the perfect everything. Perfect bowl of food, perfect trim, perfect sleeping setup. So yeah, it's all about the details there.
Searching for perfection out there on the ocean in leg 8 of the Volvo Ocean Race. But what is it you've got to play with? Well, Rob Greenhouse sent us a complete list.
The smallest thing you can trim is the leech line, which doesn't get trimmed very often, but you still pay attention to it. And then obviously the biggest thing is, is reefing a sail, all that trim, and then obviously the main sheet and the main sheets, but in between that we've got a jib leads, jib cunninghams, outriggers, it all gets adjusted. Each watch has a key trimmer, so that's between Willie and Blair, and their primary roles are to stay focused on the trim the whole time.
The tacks on a staysail, that's getting pretty anal when you start doing that.
Small changes in the sail or the dagger board, for instance, they make quite a big difference to speed. So the whole time you're sort of adjusting a lot of things.
Well, admittedly, not quite a complete list, because it goes on. We've got a list as long as my arm of all of the stuff that those guys are playing with. And tomorrow and over the course of the weekend, I'll be doing my best to unpack a couple of those little speed controls that they're playing with so fastidiously. However, try as they may, trimmers, drivers can only sort of win inches or maybe a couple of miles out on the race course in terms of these little differences in the boat speed. The real gains are won and lost by the navigator. So let's check out what's coming up over the next couple of days. This is where they are. Let's have a look at where they're going. So if we roll this forward over the course of the weekend, you can see that they're heading towards America, but first they need to have one small jibing pit stop over here. This is the meteorological system that is driving all of the action, and it is going to be really challenging how to pick the right moment to jibe, how to get into the strong breeze that we can see here, and then how best to line up for the lighter winds that are going to be coming here. The light upwind, and then finally, look what happens here. Once we narrow down into Newport, well, basically the wind starts going in all kinds of directions. What that means is it's going to be a total shutdown. Now, it could be challenging. Is it going to be a win on the left with Dongfang Race Team? Is it going to be a win on the right with Brunel? Who knows? But it's certainly a big opportunity.
And a big opportunity for Mafre because they have been lying in wait for something to come their way. Just before we came on air, we dialed into the boat and Antonio Cuvas Mons gave us an update on what they were doing out on the racecourse while draped in seaweed.
Yeah, it's our camouflage, so Vestas doesn't see us coming.
So I guess then from this position, you're making pretty good progress. You're feeling confident about getting up into the top 4, top 3.
Well, confident. Well, we do our best we can to gain some miles in the guys in the front now, which is Vestas and Thunder Tide. But yeah, it's been a tough leg for us because all what happened in the other side of the equator. But yeah, we push him to it and we're aiming to pass these two guys, but it's going to be hard for sure.
Now, last time that we caught up with you, you explained that the keel was working on a manual switch. Since then, we've seen that you've rigged up a very intricate, very clever way of telling where the keel system was. I'm wondering if you could just talk us through your system for knowing where the keel is positioned.
So basically, we run a line from the keel ramp out of the workbox and onto the floorboard. We put the keel on center, and then after we went to max position. So we measure the distance on the floorboard with a knot on the string line, and we calculate the 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 and 40. And we're playing with that all the time now. So it's pretty good. When the wind drops, obviously we have to drop the keel. Now it's working well, which is because it's windy, and pretty much it's like that.
It seems to be working very well for you. You've put in some impressive runs over the last few position reports.
Yeah, I mean, it's still painful because we have to do everything just with the DC pump. We are not able to use the PT at all, but luckily for us, it's been all in starboard, so it's not many cans from one side to the other. But yeah, last days it's been good for us. We're getting miles with the guys in the front, but we need a few more.
Mafre trying to convert their position into a potential podium. Might they even go all the way and get a second or a first by the time we see the fleet cross the finish line in Newport? That is it for our show today. But Conrad, you're back tomorrow.
Back tomorrow and indeed Sunday. And for the live X call on Sunday, remember we always call into one of the boats. And now this is your opportunity to pick which one. So tomorrow, please write in the comments which boat you want us to talk to. We're going to pick the one that's most favoured by all of you. And also, do my job for me. What questions should we ask them?
Oh, there you go. And don't forget that the tracker is live, and it will be all the way to the finish line in Newport and beyond, so that you can follow the race moment by moment as it ticks by. We'll see you over the weekend.